I'm Shilo Brooks. I'm a professor and CEO, and I believe reading good books makes us better men. Today, I'm speaking with Ben Schatz. Ben is a public defender who's represented clients in federal and state courts at all levels. He's also the founder of Books Beyond Bars, which sends free reading materials to New York's prisons and jails. True Grit by Charles Portis, published in 1968, changed Ben's life. Today, I'm asking him why. This is Old School. Ben Schatz, welcome to Old School.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm happy you're here. You know, I learned about you because a listener wrote me and tipped me off to an organization that I want to talk about in a moment, Books Beyond Bars. I want to hear about Books Beyond Bars. I want to hear the story of how it started, why you started it. Then we'll talk about True Grit and then later come back to Books Beyond Bars because I got some big questions. But I think before we get to True Grit, we should establish that you do this extraordinary thing for people with books.
Yeah, thanks. So I just by way of professional background, I'm an attorney. I'm a public defender, which means I represent people who cannot afford a lawyer, who are involved in the criminal legal system and can't pay someone to represent them in their legal proceedings. But I'm a specific kind of public defender. It's a sort of a niche practice, which is post-conviction work. So my organization is called the Center for Appellate Litigation. We represent clients in Manhattan and the Bronx who have already been convicted of crimes, sometimes very serious crimes, the most serious crimes you can imagine, and have been sentenced to sometimes extraordinarily long prison sentences and are essentially living the rest of their lives or a substantial chunk of the rest of their lives in little boxes in the middle of nowhere in New York State. And the idea for Books Beyond Bars came out of my early interactions with my clients when I started to work at the Center for Appellate Litigation, and those interactions went something like, "I'm your lawyer. You didn't seek me out. You didn't hire me. You're getting me for free. It's a real uphill battle that we've got ahead. You've already been convicted by a jury. You've been sentenced to 20 years in prison, and it's going to be another year before we even get your paperwork from the court. And I want to be optimistic, but I have to be realistic. Chances aren't great, right?"
Yeah.
And so these are the kinds of conversations that you have to have with clients early on in your relationship. And these are long-running relationships, and I want my clients to trust me, and I want them to understand that I really do care about them as people, that they're not paperwork. They have lives that I want to understand, that although it may be the case that they have done bad things, and many of them, most of them would be the first to acknowledge that they are not just the sum of those things. They are complex human beings with hopes and aspirations and nuances. And I really wanted to find a way to honor that sort of aspect of the work.
Yeah.
Not only because I wanted my clients to build a relationship with my clients, but just because I think it's the right thing to do. We're only here on this planet for a short period of time, and these are the people I'm spending a lot of time with.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure they know that I care about them.
Old School is proudly brought to you by the Jack Miller Center. In a time when our democracy faces real challenges, one question matters more than ever. Are we preparing the next generation to understand and uphold the principles that define America? At the Jack Miller Center, they believe the answer begins in the classroom. Their mission is bold: to revive the teaching of America's founding ideas, documents, and history on college campuses, in K-12 schools, and beyond. Since 2004, the center has built a national network of over 1,300 scholars who are bringing the American political tradition to life for students across the country. And through their Teach for Freedom campaign, they're working to reach millions more by 2026, our nation's 250th anniversary. Because a strong democracy depends on informed citizens. If you believe in the importance of civic education and want to help prepare the next generation to carry on our democracy, join us at jackmillercenter.org. That's jackmillercenter.org.
So it started just me and my office mate. We just started asking our clients what they would want to read because we don't have funds to send them and we don't have legal work to give them for a very long period of time. And the responses that we got were as diverse as you might imagine from any population that you'd ask what they want to
Give me
read.
some examples of the kind of books, guys. Is it men and women both?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
give me some examples of the kind of books people are requesting.
There's a lot of escape stuff. So a lot of Stephen King, James Patterson, thriller type stuff. I mean, I'm giving you examples, but I can't tell you how broad the scope is. There's people that say there's a book from my childhood that I can't. I haven't read. It's a book of poems from the Dominican Republic. Like, find that for me, right? This isn't. We send you what we happen to have laying around.
Yeah.
We buy the books that they ask us to send them.
Yeah.
Because that, I think, is where the real value comes in. It's one thing to get a paperback, an airport paperback that you may or may not be interested in, but it's another thing to get the exact book that you want to read.
And as I understand it, you've brought with you some letters that incarcerated people have written to you, and some remarks. And I think it would be powerful to share what they think about what you're doing.
Yeah, and this is, so we send hundreds and hundreds of books a month into, and this is just in New York. So there are about 50 prisons in New York. We focus primarily on prisons, but also if someone writes us from a jail, like a local jail, or from Rikers Island, which is the jail in Manhattan, we send books anywhere where they will be accepted, and oftentimes they are not accepted. They're rejected by the prisons. Our job, we are not censors of. We have no agenda. We have no political aim. We don't try to take a role of feeling like we need to educate anyone. This is what would feel good for you to read. That's what we want to send you. So that's the philosophy. And we send hundreds of books a month, obviously thousands a year, and we've been doing this for a decade. So we're talking a lot of books, and we get a lot of thank you letters, and it's very touching because all the letters come in there's no internet.
They're handwritten.
Right, they're handwritten.
You got
letters.
a piece of old school line.
This is
notebook paper. And with the pink stripe down the side, man. Like, that's what I like. This is old school.
So these are all, I just pulled this. That's right.
Yeah. So give us a couple. Like, let's hear it. Just you don't have to read the whole thing, but
I'll
just give us
to read and you can tell me when to stop.
Yeah.
So these are all from 2025. Dear Books Beyond Bars, first, let me thank you from all the readers behind the wall. You may not know how much a good book does for the mind or how much you may keep a person sane. So thank y'all for doing what y'all do. I'm a big mystery thrillers fan. I love Lee Child. The Jack Reacher series, if you have any in stock, even if I've read them already, I would love to read them again.
That's beautiful, man.
Dear Books Beyond Bars, hello. My name is Christopher, and I've been incarcerated since 2024. A fellow prisoner gave me your information and stated you can assist in providing me with books. Unfortunately, we do not have access to a library. I'm not sure why. Books are an essential part of society, rehabilitation, humanity, and it's a shame that this prison, which he names, doesn't allow us to use its library and resources. My favorite genres, to your question, anything mental health related, fiction, crime, psych thrillers, romantasy.
Love it.
Yeah. All right. I'll do one more.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
This is amazing.
Okay. Yeah. Good day to the book program. I just want to say thank you for such a wonderful opportunity to bridge the gap between education and free reading from such a dark place. I really enjoy it, and words cannot explain how much this means to me. In such a down state of mind I am in some of the time. I've fallen in love with reading and have no need for a TV. Thanks for supporting my request and bringing hope to my world. It's kind of like fire at the end of a torch.
Wow.
to go back to your original point, it's really, exactly what they want. And access to information is one of the most important things.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing to go once you are ensnared in our system.
I'm going to say this to you, and I mean it with all my heart. You're a man of compassion.
Thank you.
What you said a minute ago, and then reading these letters, it's amazing. And that is a value and a virtue and a principle that we don't have enough of today in our world.
Thank
so
you.
I'm really grateful to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's talk about true grit.
Oh, love it. I forgot we were going to get to talk about
we're going to get to true grit. I can't not get to true grit.
No, that's the point.
So
right?
I'm curious, why did you choose this book for today? We're going to tell people what it's about in a minute, but why did you choose that book?
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to be hard for you to find guests on this show that come in with who are brilliant people, who have brilliant books with brilliant intellectual ideas in them. I would not be one of those guests. I think part of the reason that I stopped reading was because I was struggling to get more out of it than I had the capacity to get. And recently I've sort of just fallen back in love with the story and enjoying the poignancy and the humor in fiction. And I've been on a tear like you would not believe the past year or so. I've read almost all Toni Morrison books, almost all Philip Roth, Jane Austen, just like,
it's all good stuff.
A real gamut. Just no focus. Just picking. Just coming across these books. I live in Brooklyn, and you can pick a book up off the street.
And you have a day job. How do you fit this in? I get letters all the time from people saying, "Man, how do I read? I've got to work." You're a lawyer. So when do you read? How do you fit this in?
I read right before I go to bed.
Okay.
But I think there's a couple things here. One is, and there's a Stephen King book that's a nonfiction Stephen King book. I think it's called On Writing or something like that. It's just it's a little autobiographical, but he talks about learning to just read in little spurts.
And that's what you do.
It mostly needs to be when you're going to pick up your phone, you pick up the book instead.
Not a bad habit. That's great. That's a good practice.
And it really, really works.
So for people who haven't read True Grit, can you just give us, so that you and I can talk a little bit about the content of the book, can you give us a brief summary, of what this book is about, as though you're trying to sell it to one of your buddies who, you're trying to get them to read?
Can I just read from it?
We can in a minute.
Okay.
But just summarize what it's about, the arc of the story. As simply as possible.
The story as simply as possible. And this is where I was gonna go with. You can read the first paragraph and know exactly what the entire book is about. It's about a young girl who lives in Arkansas, whose father is murdered by a farmhand, essentially, who is living on their property, and she goes to avenge her father's death. And it's about her adventure. From her home in Arkansas to essentially like a border town in Arkansas. This is in the 1800s, as the United States were still forming. And she goes into Choctaw Nation and Cherokee Nation and pursues this outlaw who murdered her dad.
Yeah. And this is Mattie Ross is her name, and she's pursuing the outlaw Tom Chaney. And she, along the way, is looking for vengeance, and she meets one of the most famous characters in Western American literature named Rooster Cogburn. And we should talk about all of that. But one of the things that I love about your book pick is I'm a Texan, and one of my favorite genres is Western American literature. And I'm constantly...
No kidding.
People who talk to me all the time I'm talking about Westerns, and don't get me started. Westerns are perennially attractive books to men. I can remember my grandfather sitting and reading one of my favorite Western authors, a guy named Louis L'Amour.
Oh yeah, we get a lot of. I bet you get.
I do. That's requests. A man. He's among men. He's a real. So Louis L'Amour, one of my favorite authors. Period, is a literary Western writer named Larry McMurtry, who wrote a book, Lonesome Dove, but many others, Terms of Endearment and The Last Picture Show. So I want to ask you this question because you're clearly True Grit has spoken to you. The West, the American West, and Westerns of the kind that this one sort of is, speaks to people. And it's a genre particularly that males gravitate to. They love sci-fi, the West, but Westerns in particular.
Yep.
What is it about the world of True Grit? And tell us about that world that you find attractive. And then we'll talk about the story more. But I'm just curious, like, what you're not even from the West. Like, you don't even, right?
Right.
Why are you trying to be a cowboy with the True Grit people?
Yeah. It's a good question. I don't know that component of the book is what attracts me to it. It's certainly, there's certainly excitement in all of the typical Western,
outlaws and guns.
Yeah, there's
horse chases.
There's outlaws and guns and all kinds of.
There's justice.
And
that's West.
Yeah, and I'm sure you remember from the book. There's like a healthy dose of criticism for lawyers, and they're getting in the way of.
We're going to talk about it.
Rough justice, right? It's an exciting. It's the you're guaranteed all of that excitement, but I don't know. And I've read Larry McMurtry, although not Lonesome Dove. I don't know that I'm drawn in particular to that, any of those tropes necessarily. I think what is interesting to me in particular about this book is what is unique to it, at least, maybe not totally unique, but at least somewhat different from the sort of standard classic Western, which is that you have Rooster Cogburn, who is your, classic John Wayne outlaw catcher, but the protagonist is a 14-year-old girl. And a lot of the really touching and poignant moments from the book relate to her experience going on this adventure that she's, not supposed to be doing. And so I think it would be a much less interest. It wouldn't be a book if it was just Rooster Cogburn chasing Tom Chaney through.
That's right. But what it does have and I agree with you on that, and we need to talk about Mattie Ross. What it does have that the quintessential Western has is very, very clear good versus evil. Now, this can be presented in a cartoonish way, white hat and black hat, the sheriff and the outlaw. But this book is about seeking justice, and in some ways about seeking vengeance. And that's true of a spaghetti Western. That's true of the worst cartoon Western, you know what I'm talking about? And it's true in a deeper way. You're absolutely right, in a deeper way of this book. So let's get to what you're attracted to, which is this young 14-year-old woman, Mattie Ross. She has got to be, the voice of Mattie Ross has got to be one of the most unique and enduring voices in all of American literature. When you hear her talk, you cannot help but know, if you've read this book, that's Mattie Ross talking. She doesn't talk like anybody else. Let me read a quotation.
That's so true.
Let me read a quotation. This is, she goes into a town. She's looking for somebody who killed her father, Tom Chaney, and she goes into this town and she sees a hanging, a good old-fashioned Western hanging, like guys are hanging. And she's going to the undertaker to go see her father's dead body. And this will give you a sense of her voice. She's 14 and she just saw some dudes hung, and she's on her own going to try to find her father's dead body and avenge his killer. And she says this: "Perhaps you can imagine how painful it was for us to go directly from that appalling scene to the undertaker's where my father lay dead. Nevertheless, it had to be done. I have never been one to flinch or crawfish when faced with an unpleasant task." She says later, if you want to do anything done right, you have to do it yourself. Like, that's her attitude.
These are just tremendously grown up, sort of thoughts for a child. But there's that there's humor there. There's, sort of some childish sweetness, but also like this unbelievable maturity. And I don't know if this is a coming of age story of the kind of, but it has that element.
Mattie's voice is one of the most unique, in my view, in American literature. Can you give us, so people can hear her, the quintessential Mattie Ross?
Yeah, and there's to me, in her voice, you find sort of the full range of human emotion. And you're right, it is a very sort of special voice that Portis gives her. And so I have two passages I want to focus on.
Yeah, please.
One is quite lighthearted, and one is quite sad. And it's not hard to imagine her saying either of these. So here's the funny one. She's talking about her father was murdered after going to another town to buy some horses. Okay. And so that's just to tee it up. She says, I hated these ponies for the part they played in my father's death, but now I realize the notion was fanciful, that it was wrong to charge blame to these pretty beasts who knew neither good nor evil, but only innocence. I say that of ponies. I have known some horses and a good many more pigs who I believe harbored evil intent in their hearts. I'll go further and say that all cats are wicked, though often useful. Who has not seen Satan in their sly faces?
Yeah, she's got an opinion about just about everything.
She's incredibly opinionated, incredibly matter of fact.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Then she goes on to quote a Bible verse about, which I did look up, which has to do with the devil, hogs being possessed by the devil.
Yeah.
And then, shortly before that, and this doesn't really need teeing up, little did Papa realize that morning that he was never to see us or hold us again, nor would he ever again hearken to the meadowlarks of Yell County trilling a joyous anthem to spring. These are just, 14, I think 14, or early teens, it's really, really beautiful how he makes this sort of internal monologue she's having or whatever she's giving to the reader so believable, because it would be easy to write this character and say that's not a teenager. You completely understand who she is without a lot of explanation about who she is. You learn, she's religious, she takes care of her mom, she's good with numbers, she's sort of grew up quickly, all that stuff. But it's through these kind of passages like I'm describing that you really understand the kind of person she is and what's driving her to do this.
She's a severe, level-headed, pious, opinionated 14-year-old girl who's not freaking kidding around. Let's talk about some of the other great characters in the book, because I want to put Mattie in dialogue with them. So she goes on this journey to find the killer of her father. And one of the things that she says at the beginning, she goes around talking to people and she says, I need to find help. I want to find a man of true grit. I want to find a man of grit. And they give her some names and she, they're like, well, so-and-so, and then there's so-and-so, and then there's Rooster Cogburn. I don't know if you want to deal with Rooster Cogburn, right? This guy, he's a little bit off his rocker. He's a drinker. He's got an eye patch. He's kind of an old world type of guy. He's been known to rough up people a little bit more than he should. He gets in trouble with the law, even though he's a marshal, because sometimes he kind of ignores the norms of, legal procedure that you would know a lot about in his arrests and these kinds of things. And so he's a rough dude. Talk to us about Rooster and why does she choose him? Because of all the people, that's who she chooses. And that's the guy who, as you mentioned, if you watch the films, there's been two made, one with John Wayne, one with Jeff Bridges, that you got to get the star for. You got to get somebody. So what is the deal with Rooster Cogburn?
And I totally agree with you. The character is just monumental.
Yeah.
I have opinions about the movies, which we can get to if there's time.
Later,
You're right. This initial scene where he's introduced, which is she's getting a list from the sheriff of the available marshals to accompany her on this mission to try to find her father's killer, and some are excellent trackers, and some are very noble and law-abiding, and make sure that they always bring in the culprit alive. And what she learns about Rooster is just he's out for justice, and that's what she wants. And there is a theme throughout the book of what real justice looks like, because there are lawyers that are gumming up this is the century of the origins of due process.
Yeah,
right.
You make everything difficult for Rooster. Like he could just arrest people and hang them or get them in jail, but people like you are trying to give them rights.
And there's a scene. There's a scene in the book shortly thereafter where Rooster lives in the back of a Chinese grocery store, and he sees a rat on the floor eating some of the meal out of the corner of the bag. And he pulls out his gun to shoot it, and he says, "Wait, this is how you have to do it now."
Yeah.
Dear, excuse me, Mr. Rat, I have a writ here. It's a rat writ. It is, I have to serve it upon you before I can take you in. And then he just shoots the rat.
Yeah, that's justice.
Right. So these are the qualities that are appealing to Mattie.
Yeah, she loves these qualities, and they have such a wonder. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and when I was looking at this is going to sound bizarre, maybe, but when I'm looking at the way Rooster and Mattie interact, I kind of was reminded of my daughter and me. Like I'm a little bit rougher. I'm a Texan, whatever. She's young, cute, very polished, and like sometimes I feel like I'm corrupting this little girl, but I care a lot about her. And you get the relationship between Mattie and Rooster, the way it evolves is really beautiful because he is rough, and she's like, "I'll pay you to go with me," and he's like, "Yeah, I can't take a little girl. I'm sorry." And she's like, "No, I'm coming. And then he's like, "Ah, geez." And then they go. Yep. She goes, and he's always trying to get rid of her. Like, let's take off and then leave her behind, and she'll have to go home. And boy, she always shows up, and so it's a beautiful relationship. I think oddly sort of father-daughter relationship. I'm curious what you make of this. You've talked about justice in this book. I can see why you're attracted to it. You're a lawyer. Your deepest concern is justice. This makes some sense to me. I'm going to give you a metaphor, or at least an interpretation. Mattie seems to be seeking justice as eye for an eye. She's like, "Look, you killed my father. I'm about to go kill you." Rooster only has one eye. In other words, he has an eye patch on.
I knew you were going to get out ahead of me in terms of
that's my job. So he has... he is the man who is going to serve the kind of old-fashioned, Old Testament eye for an eye justice. And that's what she wants. And there's all kinds of things wrong with that. And it's a good thing you exist, because even in our system, there's all kinds of things wrong with that. But on the other hand, there's something kind of appealing about that.
Right, because when I'm reading this book, like, what I want. I
don't want Rooster to enforce the law with a pistol.
I don't want the lawyers to intervene and save Tom Chaney.
Yeah,
right?
You're darn right. There's a third character. Let's complicate this a little bit more. We're talking about the great character. Let's get one more. He's a Texan. I can't help it.
Yep.
It's kind of I'm a Texan. I'm a little offended, but it's true. This guy named LaBeef, which I think it's spelled LaBouf. It's like a French thing, but it's his name LaBeef, which I like because it's Texan beef. You know what I mean? But he gets in there. And in the Coen Brothers movie, he's played by Matt Damon. And he's kind of pretty, the way Matt Damon is. Right. He comes in like a Texan. He's got his shiny spurs. Right. And he's got his big, beautiful horse. And he's got his nice hat. And he's real good looking. He's got these revolvers that are just beautiful and like got pearl handles or something like that. And he's, the Texan. And he's got a kind of nobility to him. In other words, he's more respectful of the law than Rooster. He's heard of Rooster. And he's a man of a kind of more sophisticated justice. We got to arrest this guy, take him back, and try him, and that kind of stuff. And Mattie and him, he also thinks she's a little girl and should get the heck out of the way. But what role do you see LaBeef playing, and how does he add to this interesting trio of characters seeking justice?
Well, now you're making me think more about the symbolic role that these two sort of modes of justice accompany her.
I think that might be.
I mean, I think you're totally right, and this is the beauty of this book. Yeah. It's like I needn't have thought of any of that in order to just love this book.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are layers unexplored in this, and what you're saying is very. I hadn't thought about it, but it's very true and very, very beautiful. There's sort of this, you have this sort of rough justice, shoot from the hip type lawman. And you have the, prideful, sort of fancy pants, Texas brush popper. As he takes great pride in his work, takes pride in being a Texas Ranger. Some of the funnier parts in the book are the interchanges that LaBeef and Rooster have with each other. which all sort of run the, one example, which I think is pretty characteristic, is, LaBeef talking about how, you haven't known thirst until you drink out of a puddle left in a hoof print of a horse and be grateful for it. And Rooster responds by saying, if there was ever a Texas Ranger that I meet that didn't tell me about how they drank out of a hoof print, I'd shake his hand.
That's true. I know it.
So,
I mean, what do you think? So the novel's called True Grit, and I wonder what it means to have grit. And I wonder whether, when you're looking at that title, True Grit, are we supposed to apply that to Mattie more than to Rooster?
Yep.
Because Mattie, in the end, man, there's a big climactic scene. I don't want to talk about it, but she ends up having her arm amputated. She kind of becomes this kind of rough older woman. There's where she's she's telling the story as an older woman. And you think about true grit, you don't think about a 14-year-old girl having true grit, but you get to the end of the book and you think, man, Mattie is the one.
That's right.
With the true grit. But that's not to take anything away from Rooster, because I love and wish I was. I'm serious. I fantasize about being like Rooster Cogburn. I want to be that. I love that character. Even though Rooster is like, he's a drunk and he's a bit rough around the edges and he's kind of ignorant and stubborn, you still are like, I love that guy. So my question is here about grit. What is true grit? What are we taking away from this about grit? What does it mean to be a person, a woman, or a man of grit?
I think that's your reading of that. I totally agree with it. I think that Rooster's grit is the sort of two-dimensional grit that you can just sort of compile the adjectives. It's someone who is gonna do what it takes, and someone who, will withstand, a great deal of, pain to reach their goal, and is persistent, and, he embodies all of those things. He's the John Wayne, he's going to go out and get his man no matter the cost, kind of. Mattie's grit, and I think that's ultimately what the title references, is, grit of character. And, there are passages in there where she says things like, she misses her father's funeral because she needs to go avenge her father's death. And she says, some might fault me for missing my own father's funeral, but I had to do what I had to do. Those are the passages that I think really speak to her grit. And
I agree. What I love about it is Rooster is, I think the reason I'm attracted to him is he's a manly man. And I like a good manly man. Mattie is manly. I mean, I hate to say that because it's a womanly, she's certainly effeminate and very articulate, but there's something about her that you wouldn't associate with the female that I really admire. And I think Port is a genius in making this young 14-year-old girl, she's more manly than I am. And I'm like, she's a 14-year-old girl and she's making me feel inadequate. And so that's what I love about her and that grit.
There's nothing at all unbelievable about her character, though, which I think is what is so.
And she's 14, and that shows that the stereotypes don't really hold. She's incredible, and she's tough, and she's courageous.
Right, and I'm just recalling one other scene where she's negotiating. This isn't about being tough out in the plains. This is her. She gets to the town and she has to negotiate with the stock trader, the person who sold the horses to her dad.
I know.
And she says $325, and he says $100, and they wind up at $325.
Yeah, because she's not kidding around.
Right.
I love that about her, and that shows that grit is not for one type. I mean, that's a characteristic that can be applied to and used by and embraced by a wide variety of people.
She uses the tools that she has, right, and including her lawyer back home.
Absolutely. The word of the day is nubbin. It's a word I think we have to bring back. It's a good Southernism. Let me read you this. This word nubbin comes up in True Grit. This is when Rooster Cogburn, the main character, sees little Mattie Ross, 14-year-old girl, pull out a gigantic Colt pistol. And he can't even believe that she's big enough to hold this thing. He says, "By God, a Colt's Dragoon? Why, you are no bigger than a corn nubbin. What are you doing with that pistol?" Nubbin means something that's a little small part or a little bit. So this is a nubbin of corn, little baby carrot's a little nubbin. I got a little short daughter. She's a little nubbin walking around. Corn nubbin. Bring it back. I'm curious about the person out there, or maybe the person behind bars, I don't know, what is it that they're suffering from or that they might be in search of, where if they read True Grit, it would shed light on it? You see what I mean? Like,
Right.
what kind of medicine is this book for the soul? What kind of enlightenment does it provide? What is the person searching for when they're reading True Grit? You found it in the book. What is
Right.
that?
That's a great question. And I mean, I think ultimately, I wish I had sent this into the prison so I could hear, if I had more time, I totally would, to hear from
Yeah.
the participants. I say clients, they're not my clients. They're participants in the program, what this book does for them, and to sort of get a firsthand account. If I had to guess, it's just wonderful escape.
Yeah.
And escape is, a term associated often with prison. Obviously, we're talking about a mental escape here. It's a different experience. And one thing that I've learned from my clients over the years about prison is that it's tremendously, uh, uh, you know, challenging in many different ways, but it's also just very boring.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there all day, and you have a TV that you might have access to that has a few channels, and you're watching whatever's daytime TV that's just completely unfulfilling. It's a totally different experience when you have a book in front of you and you can get lost in that book. And I think escape is one of in the initial letter I read, one of the letters I read, one of the primary sort of points of the program. It's if you want to be in a different place,
Yeah.
than your physical environment allows, this is one way that you can do it.
You can sit in a prison cell and adventure around the world. I mean, that's a beautiful thing that books can do.
Completely.
Yeah.
And we have participants who are just essentially they're ready to start a business when they're done with their time, with their bid, and they want books about, give me the manual for elevator repair for New York City, 2025, right? Like they want information, and they want to learn, or give me law books so I can understand what is happening to me.
Yeah.
Or give me something that I can talk with people around me about. But I think a big part of this is escape.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question, because you deal a lot with folks behind bars who are in difficult circumstances. Clearly, you were called to this work. You do public defender's work, and you've already mentioned sometimes it's thankless working with these people. They've already been convicted. I'm going to preface this question by saying this. The American justice system is an achievement in the world. That there are things like due process, that there are things like Miranda rights, that there's something like the Constitution, that people are innocent until presumed guilty, that there's a fair trial process. All that is one of the greatest achievements in the history of the West that I'm a professor of political philosophy and I talk to students about all the time. There are some things wrong with every legal system. And
I was hoping you would get there.
Yeah, and ours too. Right. So from a guy on the ground, boots on the ground, acknowledging, as both of us I think would, that what the American justice system is an achievement and gets it right a lot of the time and is infinitely superior to all kinds of other alternatives in the world. What do you think is the greatest drawback, flaw, or problem that you see today in the work that you do in the legal system?
It's hard to know where to begin, because for the last 12 years, I've essentially immersed myself in those problems. There are problems with respect to convicting people who are innocent, right? That is an example that we know happens. We know happens a lot. I have clients who I am convinced are innocent of the crimes they've been convicted of, and I can't get them out of prison.
Yeah.
There are problems with respect to racism in the system, with respect to police behavior. I'm being somewhat polite in my descriptions of these things. I don't know where
it's a free press. You say what you want.
Oh, you say whatever you want. Okay. I see it firsthand. The cops are racist. It affects my clients who are Black and brown in disproportionate percentages. The system itself is stacked so powerfully in favor of the prosecution. That even if you have, I like to think I'm like a pretty good lawyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even if I have a docket of more cases than I can possibly handle, and that's true of appellate defenders, and that's definitely true of trial defenders who are meeting their clients to decide what to do. It is a system not of trials, but of pleas. So you get an offer and you can decide, do I take this offer and go to prison and admit my guilt? Or do I exercise my constitutional right to have the government prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a tax to doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's called a trial tax. It's a real thing, although the courts wouldn't acknowledge it. The tax goes like, if you get a plea offer of, say, 5 years and you admit guilt for, say, assault, and you decide to turn that down and go to trial and exercise your right to have the prosecution prove you guilty, you're going to get a sentence of 8 years.
Yeah.
I'm just making those figures up, but that's how it plays out, and it plays out every day. And my clients are doing nothing other than exercising their right to go to trial. So it is an incredibly coercive process for people who are involved in the system, whether or not they've committed the crimes they've been accused of.
Can you give me an example of some of the clients that you've dealt with where you've really seen some problems with the justice system? What does it look like on the ground?
Right. Apart from all of the sort of global problems you can identify about the justice system, on the ground, it looks like a lot of very, very mentally ill people who have, all of the luxuries that I've experienced in their life. Every one of those luxuries, they've been kicked in the head, basically. And it is, they are a product of abuse. They have suffered terrible things. They have terrible mental illness. They have not had the opportunities that you and I have had in a variety of contexts, and they are essentially instead of being given those opportunities by our government, by our system, they are sent to prison, and they're not rehabilitated in the prison. They just sit there for a while and they come back out. The suggestion that these institutions are correctional institutions is just a euphemism. It's really a little cage to put people in because we don't know what else to do with them. And it's a problem of resources. It's a problem of lack of education, and it's a problem of sort of adhering to a problem of politics about what's scary for people, and not really getting at what would help the lives of our fellow citizens. These are the most disenfranchised folks you could come across, and there isn't a soul who has given them a thing in their entire life. So on the ground, that looks like people who are clearly addicted to drugs, not being able to get out of these patterns and not being given help.
That's very articulate, and it provides a nice contrast to what I said about the merits of our justice system, which are real. Given that that's the case, what you said, and I'm making the argument, and I don't know that you would disagree. If you can, you should, that there are two sides to the coin, that it's both got its great merits and its great problems. And you are face to face with those problems, boots on the ground every day. And I can tell you feel passionately about it. Why do you keep getting out of bed doing what you do every morning? Because I suspect you could make a lot more money. I suspect you could do all kinds of things.
In fact, I did.
Yeah. And so I want to know from a guy who feels called to a noble purpose, why do you get out of bed every morning? What is it that makes you do this? Knowing what you know about the problems.
Right. Well, I want to, I think there are a lot of different motivations for public defenders as to why they do this work. So this is just my personal reason. I think there are a lot of people that would give a much more sort of anti-state, anti-government response. I'm not necessarily there, although I do, as you could probably tell from my previous answer, harbor some of those views. My view is that it's a very human view, which is that we're all complicated people in this world. We all do good things. We all do bad things. We are nuanced, we are flawed, and my clients are no different than you or me or anybody else. And they deserve, just like anyone else, to have an advocate, to have someone go into court and stand up for them and speak on their behalf. And I want to win, but my goal is to show my clients that somebody cares about them. And to, at the end of the day, gain their trust and satisfaction with their representation.
And the fact that that's possible, what you just said, is precisely the merit of the legal system I'm talking about, that you are allowed to care, that you do get to show what you believe they are innocent or guilty of, that you do get to represent them. That's amazing.
It's a very complicated question. And, if you're a public defender, you've thought about, whether you are not serving a role that is, propagating all of the problems that I just described a minute ago. Where you are essentially a front for the justice system to funnel all of those people into court to take a plea, to send them to prison, because the system can then say, well, they were represented by counsel. They had a sophisticated lawyer at their side who was advising them as to the best thing to do. When in reality, that their public defender who's sitting next to them really is advising them, look, you can take this now or you can go to trial later and get something worse. And there isn't a whole lot of sophistication there.
The solutions to this problem, like you're a guy who you've diagnosed a problem that's real. Do you have thoughts about what could be done to make this thing better over the course of, you've had a lot of experience on this.
Yeah, a lot of it goes, this is like, I think, a nice point to make. A lot of this goes to education. It goes to who the decision makers are. A lot of times in my work, these are judges, a panel of judges, just like you'd see on TV. There's 5 judges that sit up on a higher bench and you're arguing to them just like you would do in the Supreme Court. Those judges are not always selected because they are the most caring, intelligent people. They are selected for political reasons, for willingness to do the work. And frankly, they're overwhelmed with the number of cases they have. And so even if it were the case that they could understand really what's going on and fully appreciate the facts of the case and the circumstances surrounding the crime, they wouldn't have time to do any of that because they have 30 other cases behind them. And so it results in sort of a rubber stamp process where they're making sure some great injustice isn't done. And sometimes they're not even right about that, and then moving on. And it really does tie into what we were talking about rough justice, right? These are judges with the imprimatur of LaBeef, but who are really acting as Rooster.
Beautifully put. You got time for a quick lightning round?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I got to ask you this question. True Grit has been made into 2 famous movies. One with John Wayne as Rooster, one with Jeff Bridges as Rooster. Who's better?
Jeff Bridges, no question.
Really?
Yeah, that's maybe controversial.
People have been
question.
telling me John Wayne for the past.
People like John Wayne. That movie is terrible.
You just threw down the gauntlet, man.
The new movie is the newer movie with Jeff Bridges is
the Coen Brothers version.
It's very faithful to the book.
It is beautiful.
And the old one is like,
I love John Wayne,
yeah, the old one is it's trash.
Do you have a favorite book about law or the justice system? This is a whole genre. it's a whole thing. Do you have, and if not that, then like a philosophic work, just a book that speaks to your profession?
I think this isn't a law book. I'd have to think, there's probably all kinds of nonfiction books that I could think of that are, interesting, touch on interesting aspects of the law. But philosophy comes in the form of for me, Seneca, Letters from a Stoic, or To a Stoic, from a Stoic, yeah. Things that sort of give you a sense of, just going back to your question a minute ago, a sense of how you can continue to do this in the face of really tremendous power coming in the other direction.
Yeah.
Just how to kind of keep your head through all this.
Yeah.
Those books are really helpful to me and apply essentially in a lot of other contexts.
So I write I'm not even kidding you, 10s or 20s letters of recommendation to law school every year. It's unbelievable how many letters of recommendation. And so I always want to caution students and be like, you got to make sure law school's right for you. So give me the worst course that you took.
Ugh.
And it's a hard question because there's not the worst course that you took in law school.
Property.
Yeah?
Property. Learning about.
Is it boring or what is it? It's complicated?
Yeah, it's both.
Yeah.
It's about, who owns this, and if you stand on this piece of land for long enough, if it's your property, and what happens when there's a river flowing through it, and which side of the river, who owns the water? It's just
I'm already going to sleep.
It's about it's about the importance of property and the ownership of property, which is not super consistent with the way I see the world.
And, fair enough. Yeah. So if you could hand, you pointed out a minute ago, judges, and there's some problems there. If you could hand every judge one book and they were going to read it, what would that book be?
I would recommend that judges read something like Native Son, a book about the human being behind the crimes that they're seeing on paper in front of them. So Native Son is about a young kid who is a young black kid who's kills a white woman and is prosecuted for it. And I don't know if I don't want to spoil the ending. It's not really a kind of a book you read for the dramatic conclusion, but it's about his experience going through the process and his sort of role in that process. And you could come up with any number of books that would fit in this same part, but something to remind the judges that I'm appearing in front of, and that who are carrying this tremendous responsibility around with them for deciding what happens to people's lives, reminds them that every one of these people that's in front of them is a human being and is a complex individual with a range of emotions and all of the things I talked about a moment ago, and is more than the sum of the crime. And I think judges know that. If you asked any of them, they'd say, well, sure, of course, that's the case. But I think that's something that can, literature and fiction and story can really bring out in a way that, just reading a nonfiction book about mass incarceration can't do. And I think that's important for them to kind of keep in mind all the time. So I probably would recommend fiction.
If people want to donate to Books Beyond Bars, or they want to learn more, where can they go?
They can go to booksbeyondbars.org. That's our website. It's Books Beyond Bars rather than Behind Bars.
Did I just say behind?
Nope, you said it right.
Okay.
I just want to. You're great. We didn't invent this concept of books to prisons. There are a number of organizations all similarly named throughout the country. I'd commend you to donate to any of them.
Yeah.
Find one near you to support and volunteer with. Ours is Books Beyond Bars, to convey sort of the hopeful message that we're trying to communicate. And just to mention again, we seek out the books that our clients ask for. So this isn't you have a pile of books in your attic and you don't know what to do with them. So we don't want those. We want money so we can buy books for our clients, and we want to get them the books they want to read, and that's all your donation does, 100%.
Ben Schatz, thank you for coming on Old School and introducing us to True Grit.
Thank you for having me.